welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Also, don't forget to visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. Sign up for the newsletter over there. But most importantly, share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. I got a great guest for today. I have David Zere. He's the host of Breaking Point on Real America's Voice. He's also one of the top correspondents, has traveled the country coast to coast. David, how are you today?
I'm wonderful, Nick. I love the P.A.S. report. You have great guests, and we've been in touch for a couple of years now, and I think we commiserate about the status of things. And I've had an incredible journey with over 5 years on the road with Real America's Voice News.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that because you've been coast to coast, following and covering the campaigns and what's going on out there. So when you're traveling around, now everyone should know that you live in the cesspool of New York, where I live, and we're pretty much going full-blown communist out here. But
Yeah.
when you travel around and you speak to ordinary voters on the ground, what are you hearing?
Well, in New York or the rest of the country, I always say once you go south of Cape May, New Jersey, and west of the Hudson River, you find real America again. And I don't mean that to disparage the hardworking, patriotic New Yorkers that get it. But I think a lot of them don't. We're in a municipal union, bureaucratic, technocratic, progressive Marxist state up here in New York. It's infectious. It's invasive of other states. It's like California and New York are closing in on the rest of America. Texas is in jeopardy of going blue. I don't think yet, though. And look at the northern states. So I think that one of my favorite things in the past 5 years with Real America's Voice News has been getting to meet people on the ground, the real American voices of America. I've covered over 100 events for them on the road. I've been to about 35 states with them. The Trump rallies are the best. The diners, the coffee shops, even the gas stations. In Mississippi, I had the best fried chicken I ever had at 4 a.m. racing over to Memphis Airport after leaving, the Mississippi rally for Trump years ago. But these people get it. They're all struggling. And the dirty little secret is that the jobs have not gone to American citizens under Biden. And the other dirty secret is that everybody's working 2 and 3 jobs everywhere I go. It's funny, the Uber drivers and the Lyft drivers and the rideshare drivers around the country that I meet are Trump supporters, which I didn't expect, traveling all these years. And sometimes they're accountants, and they got to do that at night to feed their family. Because now, even if you live in Polk County, Iowa, regardless of New York, which is $200,000 a year to live with a family, the rest of the country, it's very expensive. The people's voices are being heard and aired by Real America's Voice News. There's a few other outlets that are doing it, but not the majority. They have contempt for MAGA. The major networks, even Fox to a degree sometimes, but they still have a strong element, for Trump on there. And it's not just about Trump. MAGA is common sense. MAGA is about, a message of, language, borders, and culture and family values. God forbid. That's all we're asking for. Government out of our lives. And we don't want to be rounded up for our thoughts.
But that's exactly, I mean, when you look at what's going on, it's what we're seeing out there. I mean, you have the FBI that's targeting parents at school board meetings. They put out the traditional Catholic memo where, Catholics are going to be the next domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
You see anyone that dissents from a narrative is either labeled as racist or misogynist. They're bigot and xenophobic. And if you even question the border, well, you just hate immigrants. Where are the conservative voices pushing back against these forces? I mean, you're seeing it on the ground in the places that you're going to. But as far as the Republicans as a whole, where are they?
Well, the reason why there are so many bad thoughts about government is because the government, there's been a sea change. The government was never your friend. Nietzsche said government is a monster, right? Reagan said, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. Don't trust it. I came back from the Soviet Union at 16 and kissed Ronald Reagan's picture in Kennedy Airport because people were rounded up and put in gulags just for their thoughts and for buying a kitchen or a VCR in the house. They weren't allowed to buy, goods and get services. But that has come here. I believe that, before 9/11, there was a different mindset in the country. You had faith in your federal agents. You always knew that, after Ruby Ridge and Waco and all the stuff, that they weren't your friend, but you didn't think that regular American citizens would be persecuted. It was actually since, I think then, since like things like Ruby Ridge and and Waco and, the ATF moving on the compound when they could have arrested David Koresh jogging to the sheriff's office the day before. People lost faith in government. And there's definitely been a change. And then you got the Patriot Act. Now they monitor how much money I take out. Now they got to file a report when I go to the bank if I deposit over $2,500 4 times in a day or 2 or a week. And then if you get stopped on a traffic stop, they could take your wad of cash on you. Where did you get it from? People are upset. The federal government is going into your private bank accounts with Bank of America and other companies' cooperation to go after J6ers and people who bought guns.
And
So
without warrants, I want to make it clear
without
that
warrant, right?
these companies are freely turning over this information, and you have the federal government where they've been lambasted by the court saying that, they need a warrant to get this, yet they continue to get this information. And they labeled anyone, what was it, Dick's Sporting Goods and Bass Pro Shops, anyone that made purchases in or around the Washington, D.C. area around January 6th, the week prior, a week after, they were tagged. They were threat tagged. I mean, is this the America that you remember?
No, it's not. And it's been weaponized and it's part of the takeover. In Russia, they throw you out of 23-story buildings or kill you in prison or put polonium-210 in your soup or your tea in a London cafe if you're a dissident against the government. But here, they take away your assets and they throw you in prison. And it's not much different. And J6, the whole narrative has been unraveling, which we've been saying for many years here. And now, you've got evidence that the gallows being built on the steps probably were Trump supporters. They were like, that construction was going on early in the morning. Why did the CIA have bomb sniffing dogs called out prior to those bombs being found, bombs, I say in quotes, outside of DNC and RNC headquarters? And now that Lieutenant Byrd's radio call came out, and it says he was being fired upon before he shot Ashley Babbitt, and it's a bull-faced lie. And it's coming out, and things are coming out, and the tide is coming back. The problem
what do you think about that? So when it comes to the whole January 6th narrative, we're now learning a year later that Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony was a bunch of BS, that it didn't really happen. And the J6 committee knew it pretty much then and there once Secret Service testified to what took place. We're also learning when they tried to dismiss that Trump offered 10 to 20,000 National Guard in days up to January 5th. Well, the January 6th committee said, oh, no, that's not true. He never did that. That's a lie. Well, now we're learning, and we have email documentation that, in fact, that did happen, and that was rejected by the Capitol Police and obviously Nancy Pelosi being in charge of the House of Representatives. So we learn about this now over a year later, so it's clear that the January 6th committee hid this information from the public to intentionally mislead and deceive the American public. What I wonder is, what don't we know yet that hasn't come out?
Oh, I think there's a lot, like this guy who had the gun, who climbed up on the scaffolding and fired 2 shots in the air. They're arresting grandma with the cane, but they never arrested this guy. And finally, they were forced to arrest him, because that was probably a signal. I had, Derek Evans on my show, who was a J6 running for Congress in West Virginia when he first aired that footage. Where was that footage for years? And why isn't the rest of the footage have been released? These people's lives have been turned upside down. I firmly believe that J6 was a setup. They had a month or two to plan it because they knew the Stop the Steal protest was going on the steps of the Capitol. I believe they took advantage of it. They embedded people with it. They had agitators in the crowd. John Sullivan admits it on camera when he's running into the Capitol, saying, look, I told you so, to the supposed CNN correspondent that was with him, or documentarian. He said, I told you You know, there's proof that these people knew in advance. What about the clothing that was found in the railway under the Capitol? You know, if you haven't been to the Capitol, there's the tram system going back and forth. There were clothes that could have filled dumpsters of Trump supporters at the end. There were busloads documented coming in from Baltimore, people changing in the woods. You know, I believe 100% that this was an effort to stop the 147 opposing senators and congressmen from not certifying the election and throwing it back to the states under the Constitution. After those days' events, everybody kowtowed and came back and they certified the election. But I definitely 100% think it was a coordinated effort. I think there were elements of other groups there that were troublemakers screaming, burn it down, burn it down. Ashley Babbitt was unarmed and was killed. And the only 4 people who died that day were Trump supporters, unarmed. You
Yeah,
know,
and I
so
just want to point people to Senator Ted Cruz when the FBI Director Christopher Wray was testifying, as well as the assistant deputy, and he asked point blank, how many agents were in the crowd? How many informants did you have? We can't
yeah,
answer that question. Did any of the informants or agents call for any violence, call to storm the Capitol? We can't answer that question. Did any federal agents or informants engage in any violent activities at the Capitol? We can't
yeah.
answer that. Oh, why can't you answer that question?
Yeah,
Why
well,
not?
it's the only insurrection in world history that had tour guides and no weapons, you know? And yet, listen, there was some people out of control there. But I
And
interview
I want to make it
J6s
clear that
all the
nobody
time.
actually supports that. There's not a single
Well,
person that condoned the violence that took place on January 6th. Anyone that engaged in violent activity, prosecute them. It's when you
right, but
unfairly prosecute people, when most of these charges should have been misdemeanors, maybe a ticket or a fine or a summons. The idea that you're going to lock people up for trespassing is completely ludicrous. And, you know, I'm not a Proud Boys supporter. I don't really follow the Proud Boys at all. I don't look at them as an important organization. But when you're taking Enrico Tarrio and sentencing him to
he
22
wasn't
years
even
when he
there.
wasn't even there, is quite revealing.
Listen, I've never seen the Proud Boys commit violent acts outright. When we had those rallies in November in DC, I forgot what it was called, American Freedom. I forgot the name of it. But, you know, Antifa was shooting fireworks into restaurants with children in there. And it was the Proud Boys who stepped in and protected people, especially after a child was hit on the street. I watched it. The Proud Boys didn't start anything, you know. So listen, most people that are involved on J6, and where's that line where, you know, you have law enforcement, you have special forces operators, you have guys who served in the military multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan doing 2, 3 years in prison for nothing. And, you know, how much of it
And
was
let's be honest, if
self-defense?
they
How
wanted to
much of
engage
it
in insurrection, they know the tactics, they know what to do.
how much of it was helping people out like Roseanne Boylan, who was being killed? You know, she was unarmed, and then the official report says she had a drug overdose. It's bull, you know. So, you know, there's a very fine line. This whole thing should be scrubbed from our history, and they should be released from prison. There weren't any Capitol Police murdered that day, unlike the narrative that's going on that day. Brian Sicknick had a stroke probably beforehand. It was a corpsman, a Navy corpsman in restraints that asked to be released so he can help Sicknick, and they sat him down on the curb, and they left him on the curb. He didn't get to the hospital in that golden hour for a stroke, and he died, I think, in the following days. You know, but you know that he wasn't hit. There wasn't a Trump supporter who beat him or anything. So you know, there's a lot of baloney flying around, and I think Donald Trump is the only answer that can come in there and clear the slate and pardon these people. And then going forward, you know, you want to treat both sides equally, you know, like when people put bombs in the U.S. Senate or when they took over the Senate during the SCAR hearings, and when they, you know, the pro-Palestinian people do whatever they want. And then, of course, you know, outside of St. Paul's and the violence and the dozens of people were murdered. David Dorn being murdered on TV, a grandfather of 11 children, you know, was strangled live on national TV streaming by BLM. You know, there's a double standard. Listen, I know it sounds repetitive, but there's been gross injustices from the events surrounding J6. And the government has been weaponized against the people. It's a different time that we live in, and it's scary. You know, it's like socialism combined with fascistic, technocratic bureaucratic establishment paramilitary state. And, we're all scared. And I'm in New York, we're in New York. When will we be targeted for our speech? Kathy Hochul wants to put us in camps and take us away from our families because we're spreading conspiracy theories. And it's in the language that she wrote into law, basically that they can, declare you mentally incompetent or whatever. So we have challenges ahead. I hope we can navigate through it. We need some reason. But somebody's got to tear the reins away from this big federal pension state. They'll do anything. And like 90% plus of the contributors to the 2016 presidential race who worked for DOJ gave to Hillary Clinton, not Donald Trump. So the upper crust of the pension system, that goes for military too in a lot of cases, the upper echelons, they're Democrats. And they don't want anything interfering in that. And it's really tough.
And that's where the mindset of the bureaucrats have changed. It used to be that if you worked for government, you put your personal political ideology to the side and you did whatever mission you were tasked with. I mean, I worked in emergency management, and ultimately it was under Governor Cuomo's administration. I had a great boss, but it was ultimately under Governor Cuomo's administration. I didn't let my personal feelings about the former governor get in the way. I didn't let my conservative ideology get in the way of the mission that we were doing. And that's the problem today. The whole system seems to be ideologically corrupt. Even worse, it's been weaponized. So you brought up the former president. The former president, you got 4 criminal cases. I mean, they seem to be falling apart rapidly.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that you have 4 criminal cases. You understand how expensive lawyers are. You understand how every day in a courtroom is a day you're not going to be able to campaign. You have a couple of the civil cases that are taking place. People are shocked when they find out that E. Jean Carroll actually worked with the New York State Assembly to pass a law, the New York State Legislature to pass a law to get rid of the statute of limitations, but only for a 6-month period when it comes to sexual abuse claims.
Yeah.
And then she files a suit and the statute, and then the law expires after 6 months.
I don't know.
Fascinating.
If you were raped or sexually assaulted, wouldn't you know the year at least that it happened? I believe she's
And wouldn't it be different than a CSI episode?
This guy, Trump's not walking into, Bergdorf Goodman or wherever it took place, right next to the Trump Towers in the middle of, by Fifth Avenue at 11:30 in the morning and raping somebody. I'm sorry, it didn't happen. But it's
well,
very
according
sad.
to George Stephanopoulos, it did.
Well, listen, they got to take ABC to the cleaners for that, and it's like, what's going on in America right now is, with Putin, at least that it's a totalitarian state and he's coming after you if he doesn't like you. Here, it's veiled, and there's definitely a gross level of election interference going on. I hope Trump can win on the 8th Amendment type issues, for cruel and unusual.
Well, when we look at the
fines.
civil suit, the Letitia James licking at the chops to take away his businesses and make a show of force and probably selling them for like $2 just to annoy Trump. Well, when you look at what's being done, you have you're in the real estate industry. You're in New York. What are you hearing from other people in the real estate industry about this case?
Well, you can do that with any builder in New York City or any landlord. Everybody wants the highest and best use for their property. I represent clients. I'm a commercial real estate broker for 36 years. They come to me, I want 10 million for my building. And I might tell them they're crazy. Or I might tell them, listen, in a certain time when there's high demand or, you're in the right situation and COs are ready to go, you might be able to get that. But you also have to add the Trump brand into it. These valuations that Trump made, Deutsche Bank looked at him like he was a whale, quote unquote. He's the whale. They wanted his business. They went after him. And he has caveat emptor in all of his financial statements. And they all said that it's up to the bank and the onus is on the bank to assess and to appraise and to evaluate these properties. It doesn't matter what I say. And how do you put a number on the brand? 40 Wall Street. He says it's worth 400 million. There's no way it's only worth 140 million, especially with the Trump name associated with it. Mar-a-Lago is, Bezos bought a house for like, I think 40 million. That's, a third of the size of Mar-a-Lago on a couple of acres. Mar-a-Lago's on 30 plus acres. Every property around it that's even on only a half an acre to 2 acres is worth $40 million.
Don't you have like an empty lot that's selling for like 15 million bucks?
Yeah, listen, I know a guy building a house right down the road from Mar-a-Lago. He's selling it for $175 million, and it's just a house on 3 acres on a private island, And the Mar-a-Lago is this extraordinary venue. It's like 60,000 feet or something. It's like 50 plus bedrooms and bathrooms in it. It's an amazing place. And then the historical context of it with Marjorie Post and the Post serial family. It's an incredible place. That valuation, I know we're rehashing history here, but it's probably worth 500 million and up. And it could be worth whatever. If a Saudi Arabian sheikh wants to come in and buy it, he might pay $1 billion for it, So this whole thing is a not only a witch hunt, but it's a revolution in the United States. It's a Marxist progressive takeover of the United States, and they weaponize the government, especially in favor of the Democrats. And I wouldn't want to see it go the other way either. And we're not, and the myth about the MAGA crowd is I met the nicest people on the road, just to go back a little bit, is that they're the nicest people. They're the small business owners. They're the guys who wake up every morning and open the gates for their crews every day. They're tired of being told they're the bad people for being the good people. And that's what MAGA is. That's all it is. That's all it is.
You had the Democrat congressman, I can't recall the name off the top of my head, that was challenging Joe Biden for the presidency, that ended up going to a MAGA rally because it was right across the street from an event he was doing. And he was shocked. He was like, they were great.
Filmed that. I was on the ground up in Rochester, New Hampshire, and Dean Phillips was there. And I got him on my iPhone walking through the crowd talking, and the MAGA people were engaging him in conversation. And he's like, wait a minute, these aren't the animals that everybody says they are. These are great people. And that's what happens. It's kind of infectious. The enthusiasm. Biden's in Scottsdale, Arizona, recently, and there's nobody lining the road for him. The Donald Trump phenomenon is unparalleled. I've covered, primaries and rallies in Iowa, New Hampshire, North Carolina, South Carolina, all over the country. There's nobody coming out for Biden. It just doesn't exist. It does not exist. You might have 300 people in the biggest Nikki Haley rally that I saw. On the same day, I'm up in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and there's like 10,000 people trying to get into the rally, 7,000 fit inside for Trump. It's probably the biggest movement in history in the world because, Obama got like 90,000 kids at OSU, but that was only a couple of times he filled stadiums like that. Trump consistently gets, and he has rallies all over the place all the time. He always gets between 1,000 and 80,000 people, and Pickens last year in South Carolina, that's a town of 3,000 people. There were like 40,000 people. There were like 70,000 people who converged on the area for it. And those are real numbers. I was in Conroe, Texas in January of 2022, I believe. There had to be 60,000 people there. I've never seen anything like it. We scratch our heads at it, and it's everywhere. I've been all over South Dakota, Iowa. I've been to Iowa, New Hampshire 20 times. Trump gets 18 to 23,000 people 2 times in the Shnu Arena up in New Hampshire, in Manchester, in the 2020 election, and then the primaries that year. He gets, and all 9 Democratic candidates couldn't fit 8,000 people inside the Shnu Arena combined.
Now, I have to ask you, because this is the third presidential campaign that he's running. What do you notice different this time than the previous presidential candidates? What's sticking out at you as far as the campaign itself goes?
The campaign has their act together. 2016 in Iowa wasn't as organized. 2020, not so much as was, this time around. They got the data mining operations. They've got an incredible team on the ground. And the one thing that I noticed compared to DeSantis and the Haley campaigns is the Trump campaign people are really nice. And they love the media. Even if you're the New York Times, they reach out to them. I've gotten complaints from one of the top journalists in the world that we've both had on our shows, who said to me, listen, I don't like the way I was treated by the DeSantis people or the Haley people. or DeSantis people. And, look at DeSantis throwing out the guy in the wheelchair just because he had a Brendan Dilley hat on. Trump invited the guy to his rally, to his rallies, and they're great at capitalizing on it. But they are organized in South Carolina. The surrogates, Haley didn't have any surrogates. She had a couple of people. You had Marjorie Taylor Greene, you had Lara Trump, you had everybody in the world, Vivek down there, marching all across South Carolina, campaigning for Donald Trump. In North Carolina, it was a similar situation. They really are organized. I think they have their act together. Look at the extraordinary job in the primaries. Over 1,200, I think, delegates have been assigned at least already, right? But it's an uphill battle. I'm not confident they're going to let Donald Trump take office. And I don't know if they're going to turn off the lights for 2 weeks before the election or a black swan event. I just can't see them allowing this to happen because the media is unhinged. They are unhinged, and they are just calling Trump
100%.
the worst things ever. I'm worried. I got to tell you.
Well, so do I. I mean, it was Mark Young from Blunt Force Truth that actually put out a tweet about a week ago, and he explained, the attacks on Trump and how it's insane. And I said, my biggest fear is how far are they willing to go? And we don't have that answer. None of us can answer. That's speculative, but that's my biggest fear. I mean, how they're looking, they have used every lever of power to destroy him. How much further are they willing to take it? But it's also why I make fun of all those people that scream that Trump's going to be the next dictator, the next Mussolini. I'm like, do you really believe the bureaucracy is going to let him do that? I mean, they would take him out if that's the case. It really is insane. And the bureaucracy is insane. But one of the criticism against Trump obviously becomes his personality. And people say that he can't win over independents, disaffected Democrats, get new voters to the polls. Has there been any attempt for Trump and to outreach to all these different groups to try to win them over or discipline Trump, anything like that?
I see it all over the place. I just had black pastors from Chicago, David Lowery, that Ben Berquan did an extraordinary expose on in Chicago.
Great event, by the way.
Thank you so much. Pastor William Green from New York in corrections and the police department for 22 years, and Pastor Leon Benjamin from Richmond, which had the third highest murder rate in the East Coast years ago. They're fed up. There's a movement away from Biden to MAGA. Now, I don't know if it's 3 points or 5 points, but you combine that with the Jewish vote that's been abandoned by the Democratic Party with the pro-Palestinian stuff that they're catering to. If you add that to the Hispanic vote, to the black vote, I think Trump adds 7-8% to his totals. Maybe more, maybe less. But I really think that, listen, I've spent a lot of time around Trump at Mar-a-Lago, at events. I am MAGA. I am a donor. I'm just for disclosure. But I'm also, I'm a conservative pundit, field correspondent. So I do add balance because I like to give the facts. But I will tell you firsthand that Donald Trump is like the nicest guy you ever met, and he's funny as hell, and I've been around him a lot. I've never seen his demeanor different. He treats everybody with respect. I was there with Rudy and Andrew Giuliani showing up with a congressional candidate that I wanted Trump's support behind, and Trump spent more time talking to the guy's security guard who was a New York City cop retired than he did anyone else. For like 2 or 3 hours he was hanging out with us, and that's what he does. If you listen to the New Yorkers on the street and the concrete biz and the limo drivers and the door guys at the buildings, they'll tell you that Trump always takes the time and says hello. He's helped people on the road. There's that story where he helped a guy with his car and wound up paying off his mortgage. Trump, I was in Iowa on the ground when the tornado hit and we had to abandon ship over there. And it was a tornado within 27 miles, so they canceled the rally. But this guy came up to me and said, my father's cancer bills were paid by Donald Trump for like a couple of years. People don't know that side of Donald Trump. The narrative is that he's a bad guy. And it's Joe Biden who's the nasty old man. It's Joe Biden that has consistently shown racist tendencies over the past 4 decades, 5 decades. It's not Donald Trump. Passes the First Step Act, has low recidivism from it because the wives of drug dealers who were sentenced by Biden under the crime bill, get out of prison after, serving less than life terms they got for being the wife of a drug dealer or whatever. And he has the opportunity zones with Tim Scott. I'm involved in a big project here on Long Island where the people are encouraged to buy land and projects in areas that are blighted, and they get tax incentives for doing it because they hire people from the area, in the low-income area. And the bottom 8.5% of Americans benefited the most under Trump, and they're Black and Hispanic primarily, and low-income people. And the top 3% benefited the least if you do a percentage comparison. So Trump has been there for the minority community. Trump has been there for the HBCUs, the historic Black colleges and universities. I've been with Angela Stanton King. I was in Tulsa, the first rally after COVID. I was with Herman Cain. I was with a Diamond and Silk and everybody. But he had 57 Black surrogates there that he flew in on Air Force One. Or his. I don't know if it was the Trump jet. Was he president back then?
I think it was Trump Force One.
I think it was Air Force One at the time. This was in 2020,
Oh,
I
okay.
believe. I think it was in June of 2020. Now I'm getting the year. I did so many rallies. But, Angela Stanton King and all these people, they love Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump. And I think it's resonating. And look at, Joe Rogan. Look at these actors in Hollywood that are finally breaking the chains and coming out in support of Trump. Personalities, the rap artist, Jimmy Levy, Christian rap artist, who lived the debaucherous life before and told me in an interview last year he changed his life. He changed his ways, Forgiato Blow, these other guys. But you got other rap artists who are big. Even Snoop Dogg's kind of coming around, but I think that people know that Trump doesn't have evil in his heart. He gave up billions of dollars to do this. And his intentions at this point are only to save America, because
and most people wouldn't have been able to withstand the relentless attacks. Now, most important question: when and where can people watch Breaking Point? We're going to have links up at the PAS report to it as well. But when is it on? What time is it on?
So Breaking Point is on Real America's Voice News. You can download the Real America's Voice News app or watch us at americasvoice.news, or we're on Pluto, channel 470, Dish Network, channel 219, Samsung TV, channel 1029, Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. Eastern. And then also I host live from Studio 6B at night from 8 to 10 at Real America's Voice News. It's a riot. It's a laugh, riot, scream sometimes. And we have got an eclectic bunch. So we're bringing you the latest and greatest on what is going on. And I'm a correspondent for other shows, including The War Room and American Sunrise. And also check out Ralph's programming. They've really come a long way. And the streaming platforms are really just, I think, blowing the doors off of CNN and MSNBC, it's something to check out for sure. We have The War Room. We got John Fredericks. We got John Solomon, who's the greatest journalist in the country, from 5 to 6 every day. We've got Bannon's War Room, which is probably the most crucial show in the United States. I don't care if you hate Bannon or whatever, you have to watch it because you're going to be informed. And it's the only show and outside of the other RAV shows that I think are really telling the truth, outside of a handful of networks. PAS report, I love what you do because you're a constitutional.
I heard that's the most brilliant podcast around.
It really is. It really is. Checks in the mail. But no, listen, you're well thought out, and you bring the arguments to the table. I'll take on anybody, anywhere, anytime. You want to tell me that Trump's a bad guy, I'll say you're wrong.
Well, Dave, I appreciate you coming on, taking the time out. Thanks so much. Love to have you back as the campaign progresses.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick. Great to see you.